what is the best use case for generative AI ultimately? What will it be? I think Her is a great example. It's a forever assistant that's with you all the time.
You're
through
referring
audio,
to the movie
right?
Her, yeah?
The movie Her, right?
Yeah.
Who's going to do that? Apple's going to do that, right? This is why Sam Altman has partnered up, allegedly, per reporting, with Jony Ive to create some type of hardware product. Because at the end of the day, ChatGPT is still an app. It's that because Jack, you talked about interface, right? It's going to get swallowed by the interface. The problem is that interface is not the best interface.
Welcome to another episode of Not Investment Advice. We got the NI gang here today. Beanie Fan, Jack Butcher, and Beanie Bilal. We got the memo trunk. Jack, what's going on? Where's your hat, mate? We need a little NIA hat for you.
Had a little, had some photos taken this morning, boys. So I did my hair.
There we go.
That's good, bro.
Cleaned it up.
Rafa,
Thank you very
can
much.
you pull up a picture
Put a
of
beanie
Edge,
on it.
Edge, the guitarist from U2, and compare him to me and Bilal? Or is our listener? You know what's so funny? Every time now, I know the large majority of listeners are on podcasts, Spotify or Apple. Don't come over to the YouTube and look at this. But if you want to see me and Bilal looking like Edge from U2, then come over here.
There we go. Anyway, boys, we got to jump straight into this because it's been an absolutely mad week. We got OpenAI Dev Day to talk about. We got Elon's Grok, the chatbot, X.AI. Rishi, Sunak, and Elon had a chat. We might touch on that. SBF takedown from Balaji. We'll see if we get any more. But we got to start off with meme of the week. And this week it's only got to be Bored Ape Yacht Club. And by the way, before I share this, Jack in our private group chat shared a screenshot from like episode 3 or something. And it was a depressing sight because literally you had Bored Ape Yacht Club on the screen from episode 3 or whenever it was. And you see the prices there live. Me and Trung are just sitting there looking like absolute lemons, just looking at it like, oh yeah, this is the weirdest thing I've ever seen. 0.2 ETH on the screen, millions of dollars on the screen there. And me and Trung were just napping, you know what I mean?
That was like, we joke about the show. It's called Non-Investment Advice. Except if you're listening to Jack Butcher in the spring of 2021. But Jack has gone on to say, I'm not owning that because if I own that on the way up, I need to own it on the way down.
That was a wild time. Man. Anyway, I'm going to share the screen. Oh, go on.
I was just saying, yeah, just title still applies.
All right, meme of the week, people. If you are listening, you might want to pop over to see this. The Bored Ape Yacht Club held an event in Hong Kong. I believe, Jack, you know more than me. Jack's been keeping me abreast of what's going on in Hong Kong. And we saw some footage of said event came out. And people, Niraj Agrawal, legendary crypto Twitter commentator, and he posted this video of this. What is going on, Jack? What is happening in this scene right now?
Mate, lads having a good time at Ape Fest.
There we go. Yeah, I mean, to be fair, it does look like a good time. They're having a great time.
What are you expecting? You know, I think this is a funny thing. The funny thing about the, you should just cut to the laser eyes thing.
Okay. So for people that didn't see that, but anybody that was watching via YouTube, you probably are just keeled over stitches. For listeners, it was like the Bored Ape Yacht Club event I mentioned, and just dudes, lots of dudes having a good time. Nothing wrong with that. Apes gone
wild.
Nothing.
To be fair, that's the best fun in a dancing in a circle like that.
Just gonna dance circle without the dudes. Okay.
That's like you remember at uni college days, Trung. Did you must have had a few lads just throwing each other around?
Man, what a few lads throwing each other around.
Just jumping in.
No, Bilal, no, I did not have a few
lads. You were on the
Sean
Paul lifestyle.
Okay, hold on, Bilal. I disagree with that assessment. It's true, it did happen. A lot of lads were throwing each other around. But what we have to say though is this. What actually happened? Jack, can you explain what happened in this event which became controversial?
Well, there was a tweet, I think, the night of from somebody who said, like, they woke up in their hotel room 6 hours after they left the event and their eyes were, like, glued shut. Like, what happened? Was something going around? And it turns out something, I've seen there's 15 people out of 2,000 had, like, eye issues after going to this event because of some, like, the speculation is some crazy UV on the stage, like damaging people's eyes. And then obviously, I'll preface this with that's a horrible thing to happen to anybody, but the like comedic value of laser eyes and this, this community.
Oh man,
it's funny. This is the thing that gets Bored Ape Club back into the mainstream news cycle, right? It's like and they did this. They put out this official tweet that was like eye-related issues. Or there's some language in there that just like spurred the meme on like crazy. Man. And Swiss people just had a field day with it, man. It was mimetics playing out in real time. Well, I think everybody's like, in decent shape now, but it was like staring into the sun for like 6 hours or something. And the effect. I mean, one of the funniest tweets I saw was these individuals that were blinded by the Bored Ape Yacht Club UV lights. It looks like they were also blinded when they purchased NFT to begin with. And I was just like, it was just not Jack. It's like the perfect joke.
The fact that there's something called laser eyes and this happened. Yeah. I'm obviously to reiterate what Jack said, terrible if someone actually got terrible times. But I mean, you gotta appreciate the humor in it, man. That is mad.
Yeah, man, you gotta laugh at it.
Very funny. It's extreme, but not that funny though. Tossing lads around. Tossing lads around. That phrasing, and I can tell you right now, as a non-Brit, that phrasing of tossing lads around.
Yeah, like, did I say tossing? Did I say that? I
don't think what you meant it to mean is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I gotta be careful what I be saying on the internet, especially with this AI stuff that's coming out, which we're gonna transition to right now. Because Jack, what did you say before the pod started about what you want to do with the new OpenAI stuff?
I said I just fed it 130 hours of NIA, so I don't have to show up to this anymore.
Wait, that chat bot you created, that agent, as it's called, the GPT agent, is the worst financial advice giving agent in the history of mankind.
Yeah.
It might just work. But yeah, boys, let's talk about what was announced, because I think there was so many. We're not going to be able to cover all of the things, but at a high level, what were the main things you got? Because we were all reading about it in the last day. Like, what were some of the most impressive things you saw or that you thought were most noteworthy?
I think the energy of it was interesting because I completely took over the Twitter feed, and the keynotes. I mean, like Sam Altman, his hero is Steve Jobs. So I saw an interesting interview he gave a couple of years ago. He said the only time he's ever been frozen around someone else was Steve Jobs. And he wasn't even like, he said it was 2008. Steve Jobs was prepping for an iPhone keynote. And I guess they had let Sam and some other people into the room, maybe a mini audience to see the preview of it. And obviously Steve Jobs and keynotes. I mean, this MF was the keynote master, right? And the thing, you saw a lot of that come through yesterday. It's different nervous energy, right? I saw a tweet about Elon's keynotes versus Steve's keynotes versus Sam's. So Steve's the most polished, because when Steve was doing it, he was in his mid-40s and he had just become, he knew who he was, fully who he was. Great communicator, the greatest communicator ever for technology. And then that run he had from the iPhone to the iPad, just incredible, right? We should actually talk about that after this segment, about how when he went on stage, that the magic tricks he pulled and all these psychological tricks, like pulling the phone out of his pocket or like iPod out of his pocket. Oh, 1,000 songs was on me this entire time.
Or here's one more thing or whatever it was. One more thing.
Or he had the envelope with the MacBook Air, which was like one of the greatest flexes ever. But like Sam brought some of the energy. I watched some of the clips, and I'd say the main thing that came out from that event, which was notable, was that it was a live keynote, because like Apple doesn't even do live keynotes anymore. They do pre-recorded things, like the Apple Vision Pro, fully pre-recorded. And Ben Thompson mentioned here at least once a month, he brought up a great point about how live keynotes are like for like technology inflections. Like you want that energy of humans interacting with a new technology. But once you're like Apple in 2023 and you have the iPhone as the $150 billion a year revenue business line, you're not taking any chances now, right? Like your message is very clear. You're trying to segment the market and trying to sell to certain people, like this camera. You're going to talk about this camera and show 45 minutes, super well edited production, right? So that was my takeaway just from the top level before we talk about the details. I don't know if you guys saw any of the actual keynote. I'm wondering if you
Yeah, I
have any
saw
thoughts on that.
clips. I saw a few clips. I watched like there's a 4-minute video of Sam Altman building a custom GPT using
Yeah.
his private knowledge, where he uploads, I think, transcripts or something from a speech he's given or speeches he's given, and he essentially was training that to then answer questions. It's interesting because I think it was this thing I mentioned on the pod before. It was like Dexa.ai or something like that, and that they had created essentially a personalized search engine for a few podcasts. So they had Huberman Lab on there, and I actually found it quite helpful. I was looking for like a supplement, and I was like, I'm not gonna go through like hundreds of hours of Huberman like podcast to find this, and I would ask it like, what does Huberman recommend for this, because he's kind of a trusted source, and it found it, and it would have like the timestamps, and it'd be like, he talked about it here, and you can just go and listen to that. And I thought that was actually an incredible use case. But this is like, I don't know how Dexter and those guys are going to compete with something like this, where you can just do it from, OpenAI's direct source. So that was one.
Well, there's a lot of that, right? It's like
yeah.
1,000 thin rappers just died today, which this really hit me. No.
Yeah. Well, I do want to ask you
What
about
are you
that.
using?
Yeah.
No, so I mean, I think the difference. Bilal, I think you nailed it. Well, before I talk about Bilal's point about the individual GPT agents that basically can do all these small tasks, people have started like small startups around. I want Jack's thoughts on the keynote.
I didn't watch it.
What about the Twitter energy? You follow Twitter energy.
Yeah.
And you've
So
been playing around
sure.
with it, you said.
Yeah. So like, tell me
Oh,
about
man,
that
I mean,
energy.
Yeah, the energy around it is, in my however many years I've been like terminally online, and it feels like the biggest technological point of obsession that I've ever been part of, like post iPhone launch or whatever else. Like, this has captured way more imagination and feels like a much bigger technical paradigm shift than anything I've seen play out in real time, like on a network like Twitter. Obviously, the
Bored
iPhone
Apes
and
was
all
pretty
that stuff.
crazy though. Bored Apes 2021 was pretty crazy.
That's true. Crypto
Yeah,
bull market
what's funny?
2021 was hard to beat as well, but in a different way.
That's-
Very different.
Yeah, and in like some I don't know, the presentation of this is different too, because it's like you have the singular figure, and obviously there's lots of people building in this space, but OpenAI being the clear leader, it does feel like a big moment.
Yeah. Like a moment in time.
Exactly. It's like, I think when people walked out of this, the tweets, the vibe that I got was every time OpenAI does something, it's like, oh, they just killed XYZ, right? They just killed ABC. But the thing with this is, because of how the UX was demoed, and how when we're talking about making an agent, it's like what Bilal described, right? It's like Sam Altman was on stage in 4 minutes. He created a GPT agent. So they're claiming GPT, those 3 letters, because you have to remember GPT was actually the technical like a research terminology used, but now it's obviously been kind of claimed by OpenAI, right? So he's calling these GPT agents or GPTs, and he made one around his own knowledge. But you have to think about the past year. People were doing, like you mentioned, Bilal, like GPTs for Andrew Huberman. Like that was like a service, right?
Yeah.
And like people were doing like GPTs for recipes. Like, oh, you want an interesting like East Asian recipe? Here's a product that you can pay for, that we've collated all the world's information about recipes for this region. And then you can pay us $3 a month, whatever. That business is dead now, because the whole point of this demo that I showed yesterday was you can just use Chat GPT to create any niche of a GPT. And
without coding, essentially.
Without coding, because you use natural language. You
Yeah.
basically just tell it what you want. It's like, hey, can you scrape the internet for East Asian recipes and then make me a GPT agent, right? No coding required. Wait,
Don't you
Jack,
think it's like, I was just going to say, I think these like, Chat GPT killed my startup, or like this thing is kind of like in the DNA of this thing to, I don't know, just like these ideas that are essentially like a single search function in an app are not products. Like
Totally.
It's like saying like this Google search is my business. Like the results of this Google search is my business. Like it's a really bizarre thing to expect that this thing is not just going to like continually eat itself. And it's like the crazy thing about it is it has like that Apple, like the network effect of Apple without the hardware constraints, right? It has this like the App Store, you know, good idea gets put in the App Store and then eventually it gets integrated into the iOS, right? A year later, let's say, you know, remember all those like basic examples of that, like the screen, changing the color of the screen was this thing that somebody was making some money off of for a while. And then it's like, Apple's like, oh, enough people use that. We're just going to take that.
Oh, yo, the light, right? The light dimmer. So
F-Lux, it was called. Yeah.
F-Lux, blue light. They just added. That's a great example. F-Lux was probably a 7-figure business, and then Apple's like, yeah, we'll just add it to our phone. So like, we shut off blue light after 8 p.m. or whatever, right?
It's like Amazon too, where they this SKU is selling well. We'll just do the basic version
Amazon
of it, or
basic,
we're gonna, like you don't. It's mad to me that is still not a common understanding. It's like you're basically working for the thing that you're building a business on in order for it to absorb your effort eventually. Like that feels like a very
totally. Well, big thing about this,
it feels like that's when you start out. That's what you're in there to do.
Well, to your exact point though, is like it's so clear that that's what's happening. Is that because now not only can you create these agents, you can create a marketplace for them. So they want
GPT store, right? That's
exactly. They want the equivalent of an app store.
App store.
And where
it's
they're
like
going
the ultimate training thing for them, right?
Yep.
Sorry to interrupt you, Trung. Like even Sam Altman saying, I'm going to make the Altman thing. It's like somebody else can write the one-line command in and say, make me a Sam Altman GPT. Like the private knowledge, the assumption of that is this offline knowledge, right? Like the only edge is offline knowledge. And then as soon as you put that knowledge into the data set of GPT, is no longer offline knowledge. I don't know how the boundaries work between
That's a good point though, because it comes back to like the original thing we've talked about probably even a year ago is like what makes all of, like at a high level, there's OpenAI, there's now Elon's thing, you've got Google, Facebook, they've all got their own versions of these things they're building or have built. And like what differentiates them is that data source essentially, right? And like that access to data that no one else has. So we'll come onto it later with Elon's thing they announced with Twitter, obviously. But that is actually interesting because you mentioned offline. So I've got a bunch of notes at home that I've been teaching in a classroom for 30 years. That is like offline knowledge no one else has, and you can train and bring that in, and that's going to make OpenAI better too because it's going to use that for its own learning purposes. But I think a lot of people don't think about even the online sources like Reddit, Quora, Stack Overflow, like all of those things. A lot of them, they're not just completely open. So there are like deals in place. I don't know about OpenAI specifically, but I know from Google's side, they have to make deals with, Reddit, Quora especially, like because a lot of that is signed in. So a lot of it's public, but there's also signed in stuff, and they also have limits to how much you can scrape and whatever. So I think at that level, they kind of actually have to pay quite a lot of money for that data source. That's why Google had a massive deal with Twitter for many years. And I'm pretty sure
that was
Elon
like a $500 million a year deal,
exactly,
right?
Because they wanted that direct access to that data. But now Elon, I don't know what happened with that deal, but Elon's like, well, wait a minute, I've bought Twitter, but I've also got this AI company, and I've got this unique source of data that no one else has, and it can actually differentiate. So, well, I guess we'll come on to that in a bit when we talk about Grok. But go on, Jack, you got a thought?
I was just going to say that those two things feel like the same end game, right? One is like, I'll buy the primary source of data and I integrate it that way and I have no limits on how I can train on that. Or I incentivize people to train it and kind of skip that step of having to do a deal with Reddit or whatever else, right? But in reality, the information that gets put into that, you just have to be God mode marketer or distribution to get eyes on your version of the GPT before it just becomes subsumed by the general GPT. It's hard to imagine that. And maybe I'm like just too inexperienced on the platform in general, but it always feels to me like this stuff would just gradually just get sucked into the single application of Chat GPT, right? If you want best in class, like the interface actually discourages the kind of app store, or right now that feels like an early version of the interface where you're like scrolling through and looking for the app store versus this thing just finding plugins or GPTs based on your query and who it comes from or who's not. Like all of that stuff is kind of a secondary layer to just getting the question answered or presenting the information that you want. And in my mind, that's like where they're going with it is gonna lean heavily towards you just getting all your feedback through that one text box where you have a dialogue versus I want to go and find the, Trung comedy writing overlay. And maybe you could access that through the chat.
That's $5 a month.
There you go. There you go. It's a cent a word, I think, Trung. You want to get on that like per word.
No, wait. So Jack, I think you bring up an amazing point though. And so Steven Sinofsky, a partner at Andreessen Horowitz, he actually wrote this tweet. He said the Alexa App Store is not the approach to copy. So this is the downside of the Chat GPT approach. And to explain it is like there's two worlds. It's like what Jack explains. Like if you're making the Trung overlay of comedy as its own product, it'll just get eventually sucked into Chat GPT, right? But then the question becomes, if you're a developer, like now you have tension with this GPT store. It's like everything we just talked about, like Amazon will copy products, Apple App Store will. The difference is this. You give Apple 30%, which we obviously even call a tax now, you're still minting money. It's not clear that the GPT store is going to mint money. Because of the nature of these LLMs, there's free open source ones. There's going to be competing Google ones. And like these apps are just not going to be apps in the same way. That's so clear.
That's a good point. Yeah. Because
like every day is.
Yeah. But this actually brings up the larger point of the problem or the prematurely saying that OpenAI and GPT is going to win or ChatGPT. The reality is this is, what is the best use case for generative AI ultimately? What will it be? I think Her is a great example. It's a forever assistant that's with you all the time.
You're referring to the movie
right?
Her, yeah?
The movie Her, right?
Yeah.
Who's going to do that? Apple's going to do that, right? This is why Sam Altman has partnered up, allegedly, per reporting, with Jony Ive to create some type of hardware product. Because at the end of the day, ChatGPT is still an app. It's that because Jack, you talked about interface, right? It's going to get swallowed by the interface. The problem is that interface is not the best interface. That's
only
all
a good
going to get
interface
swallowed.
for a few use cases, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah.
The best interface, man, the Ray-Bans that
have you
Meta
boys
did
done
might be
have
better.
You boys done the voice back and forth with it yet?
I haven't done it. Is it good?
But I've seen the video. Yeah, go on.
I haven't done it yet. I haven't got around to have like been meaning to do it, but every single person I know that's done it is like, this is the most insane interaction ever. It's like you're having a conversation with a incredibly smart and likable. It's not like what you would imagine it to be, right? This broken voice, but anyway, it's kind of a distraction. The point I was going to make just before or respond to you, Trung, is this idea of the incentives that are being set up on both sides for training. I would imagine even the monetization feedback loop on X is done with this in mind. Like we're basically paying to farm and harvest as much information as we possibly can, right? So we're going to redistribute some of our revenue back to our users, and the GPT thing is giving you that same offer, but in reality, you are one step removed from the network where you like influence the consumption of that thing, if that makes sense. Like on Twitter, everybody feels like they have the chance to hit the viral streak, right? You like the right person retweets it, blah, blah, blah. The GPT is not a social network. It doesn't have that same like erratic distribution that X does, but it feels like the carrot is the same, right? Come and train a GPT and we'll pay you every time somebody uses it. but getting people to use it is so much more difficult. And like the time you would spend like trying to get the messaging right and like building a business or a communication channel around that thing, by the time you even figure that out, it's obsolete. Versus like what feels like a more sustainable path is just like churning out content every day on X.
Oh,
Am I making any sense with what I'm saying?
You are. You're saying that. Well, Bilal brought it up. Is like, where do you even differentiate if ChatGPT and OpenAI are going to commoditize everything, right? They're going to make that Trung overlay. They're going to make the Jack version of the art. Like, where is the actual edge going to be? Because every other model is going to copy it, right? Every other model is going to be competitive. There was just a model out of China, open source model that was trained in 8 months. Grok, the Twitter X one, was trained in 2 months. So the input, as Bilal said, is a differentiator. Before I talk specifically to Jack's point about the X, like the feed that it has and what we think the differentiator should be, like I'll give you the thoughts that we have internally at Barely. And by Barely and thoughts, I mean my co-founder who does all the coding engineering. I like the idea that I have any input here. So these announcements happen. I just text him like, bro, what the fuck are we going to do? And like,
that's your board meeting right there, man.
The Barely platform basically plugs in with any type of API, right? Speech to text, text to image, all these large language models. And like, we're really not competing in the chat space because what's the point? You're just not going to win that, right? It's like, can you create a UX that is the most convenient one-stop shop for people to use? As I've talked about before in this podcast, I need 5,000 world UX more than ChatGPT's as a 7-figure business, right? That's all I need. I need 5,000 people. If I can't find 5,000 people, I'm a loser. So like that's how I'm thinking about it. So we are competing on the UX side and ease of use for certain use cases. Now, to Jack's point, will ChatGPT just eat all that? Potentially, but we're seeing enough like retention and stickiness that maybe not. Now, X fire hose. I totally agree with you, Jack. It's like the real time, 2 to 3 days difference. I mean, they pointed it out. Like that was when Grok came out, people were making that point, right? Actually, who had the Jack? You put that tweet thread about. Could we actually pull that tweet thread where basically some astute observer on Twitter was just like, "Wow, Grok's very interesting," because if you actually think about it, if OpenAI is quote unquote worth 90 billion in private markets right now, that's what it was last raised at. They sold secondaries, they valued at 90 billion. Well, Elon just acquired Twitter X, which pre-Elon, this ad tech business was worth 44 billion at the bubbliest peak. But if Jack, you want to read through Nick Dobbs's tweet thread, very interesting thoughts.
Yeah, I'll try and do the overview. So opens up 44 billion was a steal for Twitter. Increase the API price to block others from training. Bookmark button to get signal on content. Change the sign out experience and rate limits. And
so
Grok becomes Grok becomes the first LLM to train on real-time data.
And the next thing is the real time. This is the point he makes, is the time period. Is like Twitter is 2 to 3 days ahead of Google and Meta, who rely on traditional news publishers, and they're weeks ahead of Microsoft OpenAI. That's a huge advantage if you can actually get the right signal out of Twitter X, because there's obviously like the jokes people are making is like, oh, you're gonna scrape like Twitter X for real-time like news and data. Well, that's dumb because they're the sentiment, community notes as a verification tool, like the speed of the internet, community notes might end up being the best solution. Like you can see this is in place. And a couple of months ago, we talked when Jack completely convinced me about the X rebrand. Is like, yeah, they're gonna rebrand Twitter to X so Elon can take it back to the public markets as like not even just the everything app, just call it the AI, real-time AI. The only real-time AI LLM in the world that's worth $50 billion. If we're saying what ChatGPT is worth, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I can see the argument. So before we move on to a full Twitter Grok thing, let's just quickly recap some of the things, because I think we mentioned the App Store equivalent. I'm just going to list off a few things. Let me know if any of these stand out to you. So I've got a thread here from Hey Barzi. So he said build custom GPTs. We already talked about that. Create, where else was there? There's a chat GPT builder. revenue sharing we already touched on as well. Now, I do want to ask a question about that, because we talked about the App Store. I think, Trung, you made a really good point there, which was compared to the Apple App Store, and let's say even Shopify is another sort of App Store that we can kind of look at as a comparison. What gave the App Store, the Apple App Store, so much value was not anyone could just go and create an app as well, right? Like you need to be skilled in that. You need to go learn. You need to understand capabilities. There were unique capabilities iPhone that were new, GPS, the thing that moves inside or whatever. Now, I think that there's obviously going to be so many interesting things you can build with this. I don't understand enough about like what is required to build one of these that you're then going to sell. Do you guys understand how that works? Is that just going to be still you're building something with code?
Well, let's take it, right? Let's take the very first example of the App Store. The farting app was making $10,000 a day.
Yeah.
If you go to Google early App Store leads, no, but the whole point is this. That's just a dumb toy, right?
Yeah.
But like people will be making that day. When is the Uber going to come for the GPT store? When is that going to come? And what will that be? Uber, such a clear use case now in hindsight. And one of the biggest winners, if you want to talk about market cap, to come out of the App Store, right? Tinder came out of the App Store. WhatsApp came out of the App Store. So I think let's first of all take that timeline. Uber was founded, I think, 08 or 09. Its App Store is probably a couple of years after the iPhone. But if you compress the timeline, because everything in AI is compressed at this point, in the next year, there will be a killer GPT app, a GPT agent. But to Jack's point, ChatGPT will just eat it and offer for free.
Yeah, I think that the thing that feels like, man, again, I think we talked about this in a couple of episodes ago, but like X as WeChat and like mapping back to real world infrastructure stuff is another like avenue to think about this thing, where like the Uber of, I mean, I know this is hyperbole, but the Uber of ChatGPT is going to be Uber, right? It's like the ability to just do everything through ChatGPT, and the API for Uber calls the car. It's like, make sure there's somebody going to pick me up at 5 o'clock in the morning tomorrow. I'm going to the airport. Just write that thing or say it. And like decentralizing all the things that can plug into that versus like even on an iPhone, I don't think you can do that now, right? Can you? If you do Siri, order me an Uber, does it do that? I don't know.
It's not that. Yeah, there's
definitely not that Siri,
or it doesn't.
It's not that clean. Well, here, let me.
But you can, to be fair. But can I just make one point? Trunk, to be fair, I think the comparison though is Siri. If you said it's a Siri and it actually did it accurately every time, that would probably be a better experience. One, because it's audio too, not just a text chatbot, right? And that, I know it's not just going to be a chatbot, and there's going to be voice versions of that. But like you can pre-order an app, a car in Uber already, right? And so
it's just not that clean, right? But that's the point.
It's not
Apple's
that clean.
Gonna win.
Well,
Apple's going to win.
I think it's arguable. Like some of the examples, the counterpoint to all of these, the hype of all of this, which I'm obviously a fan of, is some of the examples I was seeing were kind of what we talked about in the crypto land, which was, is that actually better than what we currently have? So for example, I saw one of the examples they pulled up a calendar. They're like, look, you can integrate with your calendar. And then you can ask it, what is my agenda for the day? And it was like, it lists out your agenda. And I'm like, but you're literally seeing a visual of your agenda on this right-hand side with colors, and you can see the overlap better than the text chatbot. Secondly, it says, well, when do I need to leave for this or something? Or it wasn't even, when do I need to leave? It was something like really basic that you could see in the thing and do way quicker in the visual version. So I think I was seeing a few examples of that. I'm not like trying to shit on it. I think there's lots of amazing examples, but for every one of those examples, there's like 0.2 examples of this other weird stuff where I'm like,
so you're saying guys, 5 to 1.
Yeah, maybe more. Maybe.
In the marketing materials as well, they I feel like they have to be sort of careful about it not becoming this dystopian thing too, right? Where it's like, I fired 10 people and now ChatGPT does all the admin for my business. Like those are the use cases that are way more like value add, but they're never going to put that in the marketing. So it's like, I took a picture of my fridge and remember the bike. It helped me figure out how to change my bike seat. It's like, This is just like a axe going through the wood of like bureaucracy and admin and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Like that's, to me, feels like where the huge value is created, but that's not as happy as like, hey guys, I've got a like pair programmer for an art project I'm working on. It's kind of a
Well, the other example they had
interesting
was they
case.
gave away credits, right? It's like, hey, GPT, can you find 4 people in the crowd to give $500 credits to? And then they end up giving to everyone, right? It's like, Jack, you know this. Like that is something people remember. They remember Sama's bot that Bilal talked about at the beginning. They remember the giveaway. They did something with believe Slack, where they used GPT agent to connect to Slack to contact Sam Altman, and it happened live on stage, and he held up his phone, which, going all the way back to Steve Jobs, what I wanted to bring up about that, there's a visual of him holding up the phone, and I think somebody tweeted something to the effect of, this is Sam Altman's Steve Jobs moment, and the reason why, though, that's relevant is like, you have to remember why Steve Jobs did these keynotes like he did. He wanted technology to be touchable by humans. He wrote something to the effect in the mid 80s with the first computers, like, I want a handle on the first iMac. And people are like, why do you want a handle? It's like, because I want somebody, if they're upset, to be able to throw it out the window, to show that humans still have control over the technology, hilarious. Right? And like when the iMac came back, when Steve Jobs came back in 97, and they remember the candy color iMacs, the famous part of that, which really started his comeback, his second coming of Apple, was he and Jony Ive were talking about whether or not to put a handle on the iMac. And he's like, I want a handle. And he told Jony Ive very simply why. He's like, humans have to be able to touch the technology. He's like, if they can't touch the technology, it's not real. And he's about marrying humans and computers, right? If you look at the history of Apple, it just gets more and more intimate. It's like, goes from iPod, iPhone, watch, ears, and the goggles that they're going to do, which is why I think in the end, they had the DNA to win this, because the technology, as personalized as it could possibly get, no one does it better than Apple. And no one's going to be able, and so that means it has to be hardware, unless you do the brain chip, right? I mean, there's the end around move by Elon but the odds of the billions of people getting brain chip implants from Neuralink are extremely low. Whereas they've already sold 100 million plus sets of AirPods.
We already have a phone in our hands trunk.
Bro, look at this. Look at this. I got 2 pairs, and each of them is missing one.
Yeah. But that was a good point. I'm going to show you 2 examples here. This was the example I was sharing earlier. 1 second here. Can you guys see my screen here? Full screen, yeah? These were the integrations. Did you guys watch this? There was a Canva example and a calendar one I was referencing.
Oh, yeah.
Jack, and I'd love your take on this, being, a creative person, designer. Like, this is, let me just put this up a little bit.
Plugins to be custom actions for GPTs. You can keep chatting with this for the full design experience.
Basically, this is allowing you to give it a prompt and say, let me just mute this, sorry. So just on the screen. So he's basically in a chatbot saying, make a poster for Dev Day reception. And like, honestly, when you work with designers, I'm on Slack doing this. Like, oh, hey, we've got an event. Can you do this for us? And they're like, okay, here's a few proofs. And they'll send it to you a day later or whatever. So you can do this already in Canva, right? Like they've got some of this AI stuff already there. Canva's actually done a really good job with this. And I thought this was actually a good example of where it kind of works. Now, that doesn't mean it's completely replacing all designers, right? Because you're going to have to go back and forth, and it might not give you exactly what you want. But for an average person who's got a birthday party for their kid or whatever, this is a great use case. Now, this is the example I was saying later, which was the calendar. And I'm just going ahead here. But this is what I was saying. Like, to me, look at the 2 on the screen here, right? So people are listening. The right-hand side is a calendar we've all got on your phone. And on the left is the chatbot version. Like, no one could tell me the left side is a better version of the right side. Like, we already created an interface on the right to replace the thing on the left. And now, so you might have
Google interface, right, Bilal?
There we go. Yeah, or iCal. It could be iCal. Or, who knows?
How did we go this far about AI without mentioning? Well, the reason we haven't mentioned Google is because they are so behind. Like, it's incredible.
Well,
Google had the biggest lead. and it's just stuck in legal right now. Everything.
Yeah, that's
Well,
the
I
joke.
remember.
I've
You
seen
remember that? Do you remember that demo they did where they like rang the hairdresser or something? Or you remember that was years
They
ago?
rang it?
It was like an
Oh yeah.
Yeah, with
That
the
was
appointment.
amazing.
Google Assistant, which is like media response to that was absolutely mad. It's like the world is ending, right? When no one's like every job is
Well,
going
just describe
away.
it. So
We're never gonna.
It would call for you, right? The assistant would call for
Right,
you.
I
and
need
make
a
an appointment.
reservation at this restaurant, and they will go and do it for you and come back and forth. And it was it was shown once on a demo, and I don't think it was ever made.
I think it was in the assistant, but I never used it like that. But I guess the question is,
that was very cool.
I remember it too. But I guess the question is, has anyone created that still? And that's maybe the point.
Right.
Like a lot of these examples sound amazing until you get to the point, like of actually.
Not a good solution.
Well, I think it would be a good solution if it worked.
The better thing is Resi. Well, no, the better thing is Resi or whatever else, and then the better thing beyond Resi is just typing into a fucking box, get me a reservation, and the better thing than that is just saying it, and the better thing than that is thinking it.
Okay.
So it's just like all of this stuff is going away, and the Canva example to me is like wolf in the hen house type beat. You know, it's like we're gonna give you access to every single thing that we are capable of, and this like beastly thing is gonna learn about how people use this thing, and what's stopping them just saying, all right, that's a DALL-E feature now. We've got enough data to do a fucking birthday poster or whatever it is. And the trade-off for like a Canva is a really interesting predicament to be in, right? It's like obviously a massively successful piece of software and people use it every day. And then when you have the opportunity to tap into like another 1 million active users through this thing, I don't know how the arrangement will work between them and OpenAI. Do you have to have a Canva subscription or they subsidize whatever it is? To me, it's like if that becomes a feature that everybody starts using, they're just like, all right, it's the Flux thing. It's like, oh, you can do posters and birthday cards and logos through this thing now. And they just sort of like open the door and let them take it. But you don't really have, I don't know. I don't even have the ability to evaluate the trade-offs of that because I've never worked at anything that scale, but it must be a very weird decision to make that, right? Like Zapier is the same thing.
I think it's through Zapier. A lot of this was through Zapier too, I think, because what are you going to say, Ben or something like that?
Ben, yeah, he just tweeted this morning, was like, oh, I'm glad I sold my no-code company to Zapier 2 years, like just sold
this
the
is
top
Ben
of the
Toss of people,
no-code.
MakerPad, who also has not Milk Road.
Was the insinuation that the no-code phase is going to be heavily impacted by ChatGPT eating the world?
Yeah, there's another good one. What software is eating the world, and then ChatGPT is eating software. Somebody's probably already said that, right? It's like the stuff that this thing spits out is just mad, and like those would be endeavors that people would like learn, like sit in school, learn a language to come up with how to make it, spend years trying to figure out how to design it and build it and maintain it. And now it's like, because that barrier existed, that product, like you feel like that product had a shot. And now it's like, oh, we can test that idea in 20 minutes now. It's just, it feels to me like, and again, maybe in a year we look back at this and we're like, we're all off our heads what we were talking about here, how disruptive this was going to be. But it's like the things that people spent their time doing and took a really, really long time to produce, and that's just not the case anymore. So the rate of iteration just goes completely parabolic and just burn through all this stuff that's just not, the market doesn't want it. So let's just move on. And the amount of time we have to spend figuring out the next move is severely reduced because we don't have to staff up this team and learn this language and sort of clumsily interact with this set of tools. We just say, I want this, and it gives it to you. Yeah.
Well, the other thing I was going to bring up, unless Trung, you had anything else, wanted to add anything else to what Jack said there. There was this great thread here. I'm just going to share my screen again real quick. Did you guys see this thread? It's been 11 hours since OpenAI Dev Day. Here's 12 crazy things people have already built. Now, like, we don't need to go through every single one. This was an AI sports narrator. Did you guys watch that video? I will say,
I watched it. I was pretty underwhelmed.
Yeah, I was just about to say, wait. Can you guys hear that? Or
Yeah.
okay.
Unbelievable. What a goal. What a goal.
Okay.
Glorious.
Now, what I'll say is, this is the first version. Now, like, people were responding in two ways to this video. It was the famous Messi goal for Barcelona. Half the crowd were like, oh my God, this is incredible. Like, wow, this is beautiful commentary. And then everyone else is like, wait a minute. Like, have you heard the original? Like, he's essentially saying a lot of what the original was in a lot less fun way. But the ones that I did see that were pretty cool were this webcam stuff is the visual. Did you guys see the visual the Vision API? This is pretty sick because it basically, you just start showing stuff on the screen. Let me just share this here on a big screen. So he's going to start showing sunglasses, and like pretty much in real time, it's saying they're sunglasses. Can you see that over here?
Oh, isn't there already an existing webcam industry that you guys are familiar with? Will this be beneficial to those workers?
There we go. Yeah. Well, and then the other thing, I saw webcam GPT there, but then the other one was this travel assistant. Again, like similar to the calendar thing I said before. A lot of the comments on this one are, this already exists. It's called Google Maps, right? Like it was like a lot of this stuff is like, oh, now you can create a visual version of this chatbot with an image of what it looks like, and then you can put stuff on the screen. And again, so I do think there is a little bit of this overhyping to a certain extent of like use cases that already kind of exist, but because it's kind of like the cool thing, like if you've done any coding projects, right, like you're like, oh my God, I just made this like I literally was doing it this weekend, right, like for jokes, like a tip calculator. I'm like, oh my God, this took me so long to make, and then I go to it, I'm like, oh well, calculator does this pretty quickly in like about 12 seconds at a dinner table, right? So but that's kind of where I'm seeing a little bit of these use cases. I'm still kind of yet to be blown away by like, oh my God, I'm going to use that every day. But maybe I haven't seen that yet.
Dude,
I have a couple, but I can't show some of it yet. But there's things that I wanted to learn, specifically visual programming languages, like creative coding, that I just reached a point in time where I was like, I just can't carve out the time to study this. And there's so many better ways for me to be spending my time, that I was like, or still am, just absolutely like mind bending what this stuff is capable of doing. Like take a mental picture you have and build it will literally write code for you to generate these algorithms that will produce visuals.
You show it a screen.
It's incredible.
You show it it's like a SaaS landing page. Be like, hey, can you give me the code for this? Yeah, I'm saying that stuff's great, but I'm saying like for me, you can generate these like artistic algorithms that like have all these variables and just describe how you want it to function, and it will write the JavaScript for you, and you put it into the editor, and I'm like, oh, for example, the composition is too busy in the top right-hand corner. Let's change this variable to do this 5% of the time. It's like, okay, yeah, blah, blah, blah. Here's the new script, spits it back out. It's just...
Mate, Jack, for technical stuff, it is so incredible. Like, there's no... Like, that is, to me, has been the magic moment where you're like, oh my God, that would have taken me hours figuring out in the past. Or like, I just think of like anything coded, like anything like that, where there's so much data out there that is, it just works so well for that. Like Stack Overflow, like all the sources of data are there, and it pattern matches really well. So like just 10, 15 years ago, when any of us would have started playing around with computers or whatever it was, 15, 20 years ago, you'd be in a forum being like, oh, I posted this in my HTML or like CSS. And like, I've got this error message. You're waiting 3 days for a reply. And now you literally put it in, and it tells you straight away with beautiful highlighted stuff. And even if you're just trying to learn like that stuff, it just speeds up your learning so much. It's really helpful.
I have an actionable tip for that one too. You can, if you take code and give it to it and say, annotate this in the most detailed way you possibly can, it will go in every line and say, this is doing this, this is doing this, this takes this reference from the last line and does this. And it's just like, man, even the feedback loop, if you had a one-on-one tutor sat next to you, it just does, like the degree to which because it's responding to how you articulate your misunderstanding. I guess you could say a person would do that, but the context that it tracks to me is also just the sort of killer difference. You know, like when you're talking to Google, or you change your search in Google because you didn't get the results you like. It doesn't remember your last search and like draw a comparison between the two and infer what you mean. Whereas this is like, hey, we wrote this code. This part is slightly wrong. Oh, I get that your original intention was this, but now you've added a little bit more clarity, so we arrive here. It's not like you're shooting from the hip and then you delete and then you shoot again. It's like everything is, you like, see that progress, marginal improvement each time. And man, another example. So I'm rambling about it, but I got asked to like write a bio and do some summaries of like different projects I'd done over the years. And because it, like, a lot of that stuff was pre the knowledge cutoff, it had enough of a base to like give you a summary and just feed it just like ridiculous amounts of stuff. It'd be like, here's all the stuff I've written about this thing. Give me 2 sentences back. Give me a paragraph back. Give me like bullet points to summarize all of these funnier things. Like, you can really, but that's the thing. So to me, this stuff, that's where it's been magical, right? Like, and that's what we've all been using, that style of it for a while. To clarify what I was saying before I get called out for it in the future, I wasn't saying I haven't seen anything good, obviously, right? I was talking about those use cases beyond. But Bilal,
no, dude, I'm sorry. That messy example.
The messy example is ridiculous.
That messy example was trash. I'm just gonna say
I agree.
I get why some people would be impressed, like if they're using visuals as chat, but my God, was that underwhelming? It was
so boring. Yeah.
And Messi is running across the halfway line, and oh my goodness, look at this dribble move. It's like, it's so bad. That one was so bad that even though the technology behind it was probably extremely interesting, listen, everything's about optics, people. Like, that is not a good optic. That was
what they need to do, Trung, is they need to do that in David Goggins' voice or do it in Snoop Dogg's voice. Then it would be, honestly, that would be quite interesting, because I think that was where, like, obviously the counter to what you said was, it's the first version. They haven't even adjusted it. They haven't tried to make it more exciting, which I get that point, but I agree. Like, that example
it's like
went super viral.
When Zuckerberg showed that video of the metaverse, it's like, okay, it's the first version. Your interview with Lex in the metaverse, very cool. You probably should have just waited for that one, man.
I get what you're saying. But anyway, so no, that's a good point. But I think the only reason I want to mention some of those things, the visual stuff, there's that API. There's also the voice stuff that they updated, I think, as well.
Well, some other ones they did was ChatGPT is now using GPT-4 Turbo, which is faster, more powerful.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Speed. And then the context window, I think, is 128,000 tokens. Basically, you put a book in now and analyze it. And they cut the cost. So for thin wrappers like me that haven't been completely destroyed by OpenAI yet, it's cheaper for us, and we're passing along to customers. We're giving them more tokens. But other than that, like, did you guys have any more thoughts on the Grok stuff? I think we kind of have covered the Grok stuff already.
I think just to clarify what it was and how it's different, I do want to bring up the this one example from Greg Yang.
Just a TLDR is XAI, which is the AI startup that Elon founded last fall. So Greg Yang, total hitter in the AI space. I love that now that he works with Elon, is shit posting. You know what I mean? Like, so this what he said was academic.
Complete the sentence, ball so hard, and then it responded, ball so hard, motherfuckers want to find me, which I just appreciate that there's a different angle here, you know? Like, if you're going to be competing with OpenAI and all the other things going on in the space, you got to have some angle. And I think
no, but that's it, right? What did he say? What is so? If you read the Grok blog post, so first of all,
about
Grok,
the humor, right?
Fantastic name. Hey, do you Grok it? I Grok it. The K letter, people,
better than X.
Coca-Cola, Kodak, Spanx. K is a very powerful letter.
I think Jack, did you talk about this in the past with the K, or was that Trump?
Jack? K, well, one of us has talked about it. K is a very powerful letter for brand names. Granted, Kodak doesn't look so good in the past decade, but we're talking about a century of good stuff. Actually, so Sarah Blakely, founder of Spanx, she actually named her company Spanx because she was studying good names, and she's reading about how Coca-Cola people. Well, Coca-Cola's got two things. It's got the strong K sound, or C, a hard C, and it also has the alliteration Coca-Cola, like Google for Bilal's former employer, and Kodak. George Eastman, the co-founder of Kodak, he wanted K on both sides, beginning end. Fucking G move. But
also a fun fact, since we've been talking so much about Goggins, you know, David Goggins lived with Sarah Blakely and Jesse Itzler for like a month or something in their house.
I did not know that.
There's a whole book on it. Jesse Itzler, the husband, who's a part Atlanta Hawks co-owner, I think, at some point. Incredible stories from.
Dude,
could you just imagine
cheddar,
Goggins turning up? Oh yeah, I mean they're both super rich.
Power family.
Incredible. But anyway, back to what you're saying.
So Grok, great name. So people have been, you know, when we talked about the Twitter X changeover, people trying to give Elon a hard time about that changeover. Grok, 10 on 10. And then to Bilal's point, you got to come something different, right? So the words mentioned in the blog post were it's spicy. Right, it's not afraid to go like a little bit, get a little bit based.
It's a unique and fundamental advantage of Grok is that as real. Oh, sorry, wrong line there. It said something about Grok is designed to answer questions with a bit of wit and has a rebellious streak. So please don't use it if you hate humor. I think that's great copy on the landing page, just to let people know like you're coming here for fun. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. So there's that angle. It looks like it's performing quite well, even though it's only 2 months in. I guess it's all relative at this point, but the models are moving pretty quickly. And it comes down to really everything that the thread that we just referenced earlier as its real potential differentiator. So if you think Elon's access to the fire hose of human consciousness, which is X / formerly Twitter, is valuable, then logically the extension would be Grok has a very serious edge here. Because even Threads, which by all accounts is not doing super well, but I know it's active, but that's not real time. They even said they don't want it to be real time. So, yeah, I think Grok has a very interesting, carved out an interesting niche. And you know what? Here, let me give you a comparison. What is the Cybertruck, right? A lot of people hate it. A lot of people love it. But it looks nothing like any other pickup truck out there. And that's the entire point. It's counter positioning. So that's what I say about Grok. Grok is a Cybertruck of LLMs.
There we go.
And the inherent advantage that exists with it plugging directly into a living social network. I think that is underestimated too. Like that, and obviously the hints at the fact that money transmitter licenses and all of the things that X has been acquiring, if you layer like a functional AI on top of that, it does start to feel like a bigger idea, a bigger ecosystem than, as incredible as it is, the knowledge repository that is currently what ChatGPT is, right? Like it doesn't have the social layer in the same way X does. You know, we can't go an episode without the Sailorism in here, but you should study the network effect of these things. The Apple, like the network effect that took Apple from, you know, where it was 20 years ago to now is this like lock-in of network effect that has this like social gravity to it, which Twitter has, right? It's like, or X has, is my entire digital identity exists on this platform, but you're using ChatGPT basically anonymously versus your relationship with the model and the interface is obviously one-to-one, but it isn't compounding in the same way that you can switch out the interface or you can switch out the stack that it operates on. You don't lose anything, versus Twitter has like this gravity of people that have been using it for 10 years, 20 years, however long.
Dude, this network effect, the man, we talk about the past year of Twitter and like for all these mainstream media people saying it's dying, you don't understand how strong this network effect. Listen, we're super addicted, but that's the point. It looks like 200 million people in the world that have a sickness that can only be cured by spending time on Twitter, or it's the cause, right? It's like that. The final boss of the network effect was Threads. Like that was the final boss. That was it, right? So we'll see, man.
Sorry. Can I just say one more thing? Like,
yeah, of course.
The commerce component of this, that is a clear ambition of X, right? The monetization component that comes with like running Rails for commerce is not like the GPT thing. Almost feels like the Intel version of this, right? It's like the layer underneath, and that's not that's like more of a metaphor for like how the customer interacts with it. It's like Intel powered.
Oh yeah. Wintel,
Apple,
Windows,
right?
And Intel was the whole, like Wintel was the
which is what they're doing, right? The Windows partnership and versus like vertically integrated from top to bottom customer first thing that is happening on X. So, you know, you type into X, send Trung $100, and it just does it within the stack of all the software that they've built, or like people moaning about this now, but the Tesla robo taxi thing is going into that eventually too, right? If it ever gets built, it's a feature that integrates into
moaning. Yeah, Grok is available for Teslas. I can't remember what purpose. A lightweight Grok is available. I don't actually know how spicy I want my Tesla to be. So
yeah.
Well, they're keeping it. Yeah, I mean,
fascinating, man.
I think it's a very interesting like wedge they're trying to carve out there. My feeling on all of these is always like the best product in terms of it actually working the best in something like this is really going to be what wins long term. I do think Twitter has a massive chance at it, given one, the distribution that you guys mentioned, but also the unique data set. So yeah, I think it's really interesting to see. I do think they are starting way behind though, right? Like OpenAI's been doing this for a while. Everyone's looking at them. And the other thing is like the talent required to make this stuff long term. That's also something I think a lot of people kind of underestimate. It's like even looking at Apple, like Apple has lots of money, lots of talent, but like if you're like an AI, like, you know, 10 out of 10 engineer working on this sort of stuff, where are you going right now? You're probably trying to go to OpenAI, right? Like if that's what you care about. And that could change very quickly, but I think that's just...
Well, that's the edge, right? That's the counter positioning. With Elon, you know that you won't have, quote unquote, he frames it, the woke censored ChatGPT, because they're working with Microsoft, right? They're more willing to toe the line. As Elon has demonstrated over the past year, he will burn the bridge with mainstream media or the traditional media. He doesn't care. So like that's one way to attract talent. The other way is obviously the financial outcome of XAI, but an opportunity to work with Elon. So I think the counter positioning is quite strong for Grok. But having said that, I think all goes back to everything is about the interfaces. It kind of goes back. No one's going to do hardware better than Apple. They're just not, right? And Apple is slow. I mean, it's crazy that they had Siri over a decade ago. They had Siri, and just completely like have done nothing with it, right?
Yeah.
And like Siri is bad. Like it is not good.
Yeah, it's very bad. Yeah, for like basic stuff. For basic stuff. But anyway, so that's definitely worth us talking. But we'll keep an eye on Grok. Let us know what you think of that. Should we move on? I think we can just touch on this really quickly. Jack, you mentioned the Rishi Sunak Elon chat. This was in London, I believe. Rishi Sunak, Prime Minister of the UK.
Because he was doing an AI task force, right? That was the whole shtick that Rishi's doing.
I think so, yeah. Did you manage to catch any of it, either of you?
I didn't watch any of it, but what Jack to talk about Jack mentioned was interesting. It was like the British reaction to the chat.
Oh,
yeah. So Jack, like it sounds like the vibe you got was that it was a pretty cold reception.
Yeah, I think people sort of saw it as Sunak, like, meeting his hero, it was like some like it wasn't, and that's the
business guy. He's a business guy.
He made his money in a private sector, I think. I don't know that much about his background, but
Hedge
he's
fund,
done
like-
well.
Oh, and his wife, his father is the what's his name?
Infosys.
Infosys.
Yeah, so
There you go. So he's like,
the
I think he has
husband, family of
aspirations.
billionaires, yeah.
There you go. So he's like, you would imagine that Elon is on a list of people that he would have a good time talking to. Like that's most of the frame of the media was like, oh, like buddy, like this is not really about risk or trying to figure this stuff out. It's you like positioning yourself socially connected to the wealthiest guy in the world with no regard for the average citizens, the impact that this will have on the average citizen, right? And a lot of the conversation goes to these like admittedly like mental statements for somebody who's hearing about this for the first time, where it's like, yeah, in a few years you're not going to need a job if you don't want one. Like,
yeah, it's like a big jump. It's a big jump from what you're hearing about every day.
Yeah, and it's exactly. Or your job is going to be like engagement farming on X. That's going to be
we're going to
more
put a chip
likely
in your
scenario.
head, like those sort of massive claims. Yeah, but Jack, I think go ahead.
No, go on. You probably direct it better.
I was just going to ask about, like, from your sense, being a Brit living in the States, having friends and family obviously back home. My take on it has been like Elon has already become kind of split personality, split person in America, right? Like America, the home of capitalism, where capitalism is celebrated. Even in California, you had whoever it was, the mayor or whoever it was, who said like "F off Elon," I forgot if it was a mayor or some sort of politician.
No, it was. I think it was a California congresswoman.
Yeah.
F you, and he just said a message heard.
Message heard, right? So that was in America, like land of capitalism. Now you go to Europe, which is way more, left generally, like socially anyway, right? Than the States. After like with the Twitter stuff, like I think it was already building up for a while, but he's become really from the outside like kind of hated by a lot of people there, and is hated here by some people too.
Why England, do you think?
But I'm not just saying that. I'm saying in Europe in general, because I feel like there's this more of this sentiment of like anti-business, like a little bit of like there's more people that will say, with a straight face, like, oh, is capitalism a good system? In the same way, like some people say that here. And I think that's a fair question to ask if you want to have that discussion, right? But in Europe, it's more of a socialist, like mixed economy.
Oh, yeah. I see what you're saying. The billionaire class is
exactly
less... Okay, got it.
Yeah, they're less liked in a way. And like the whole idea of like, should billionaires exist? Like all of the stuff you've read about here in America is even more prominent from my opinion anyway, from following it from afar in European discussions. Now, like, again, that might be just my perception of it being here. But like, so to me, him going there already, he's kind of starting off on a bad foot sort of thing. And like a lot of the newspapers are going to be like, Elon Musk, the guy who took over Twitter and messed up Twitter. And he's like for the free speech radicalists on the right in America. Like that's the positioning of him by the time he's already getting there. And then Rishi Sunak is Tory, Conservative Party as well, which, to be fair, do a lot of crazy shit as well, right? And like the UK is not in a great place, and whatever you think of him, whatever your politics are, traditionally speaking, Tories have not necessarily been known to be like for the working man. Like that's not their image. It hasn't been for a long time. And so
the Labour Party is literally called the Labour Party.
Exactly. But the interesting thing is the difference between politics here in the US is the left, like Democrats here versus Republican. You saw a lot of working class, in air quotes, people voting Republican here in the last 8 years.
Yeah, that totally switched where it used to be Democrats because Democrats support.
Whereas in the UK, that's not really the case, from my understanding. So there's this big change where somehow here we don't really talk politics on the podcast, but as it relates to this, the Republican Party somehow started managing to like talk to that person mainly through Trump. The factory worker, we just got
100% drop off on the podcast.
There we go. Yeah. That one. Yeah. But in the UK, you don't really get that. It's very much like if you're a working person, you're someone in the north. Like you're generally not supporting the Conservative Party. Like, and so you put Rishi Sunak, who wasn't even really elected by general public, and then you put him there.
Oh, that's right. Because we talked about basically he was chosen as the leader of the Conservative Party by under 200 people.
Exactly.
Essentially.
Exactly.
Well, actually, here's an interesting. This is more of an AMA question. Can I ask you guys? Why do you think it is that we never talk about politics? Like, because some people can't shut the F up about anything and have opinion about everything.
Yeah.
So, like, I would actually.
On our pod, you're saying.
No, just in general. It's like,
why can't we?
Some people can't bite their tongue. I hate talking about politics with anyone. Same. Are you the same, Jack? Like, I avoid it completely. I almost don't talk
I just don't
politics with anyone.
know fuck all about it.
I mean, dude,
I love that honest answer as well.
I like that. That's very
Jack
honest.
is the best at not talking about stuff he doesn't need to talk about in a good way. Like,
I know nothing.
I don't know.
I know nothing. Like, not even that I don't have a response to something. It's just I have a response and then I'll try and take it to its logical conclusion. I'm like, I don't know anywhere close to enough about this to be starting a conversation or an argument. Yeah. Not even close.
Well, what about you, Bilal?
I think also in my house growing up, that's what I was just saying, my house growing up, it was just like literally a non-existent topic until I became, however old. It was just like my mom and dad, both in the military, came out of the military, worked shift jobs. What we talk about at the dinner table, what do you do today at school or work? Go to bed. And I feel like the idea of America specifically is just like, I think that's still true in England. Obviously, I can only speak to my experience of it. It's just, it is not as much a massive component of your social identity in the UK. I don't know, Bilal, if you would agree with that, to the same way it is here, and maybe that's changed over the course of my time. I think it's probably gotten more aggressive over the last 10 years or so because of how much more, I guess, Americanized and theatrical this stuff has gotten divided as a result of that. But
it also might be an age thing too, to be honest, because I do think you're right though. Like, are you saying in the US it's way more like political, like more people are engaging with it versus in the UK?
It's like the Americanization of it is like they're the best entertainers, attention grabbers. Yeah, exactly. It's Vince McMahon's effect on
the Democratic Party and the
communication
Party.
in general. In general, man, it's crazy, and I like that. Everywhere is like America exports that, it feels like, right? It's like it just that everywhere sort of downstream.
I just want to comment on how you said America exports it. It's so true. Do you remember when obviously, not to get super political, when BLM happened, they had BLM protests in Europe. Like, people in the streets of France were protesting about BLM, which is a very American topic, right? But it's exactly to your point. It's like it was exported because of how American politics has been turned effectively into tribal entertainment. And
I think it's that. I think it's definitely that, but I also think, Trung, to that point, like, even without going into it, like what's been happening in the last month, you've seen protests all around the world with what's been going on in the Middle East. Now, a lot of people say, well, why do they care? Blah, blah, blah. I think the reason it is so much, is talked about everywhere, American politics covered so much, is because America is the world superpower and they don't just govern the US, they govern the world to a certain extent. So that's why when in the UK, I remember in early 2000s, there were 500,000 people marching against the Iraq war when we weren't even fully involved with it yet. And that was because we're like, well, we know we're going to be invited.
Called up George W. and just like, yo, let me get in, George. Let me be this coalition of the willing.
Exactly. So, and to answer your point there, Jack, or your question, you said about like growing up. I think one of the differences in the UK is even if you're left or right, everyone kind of still hates the government. Also, like my opinion,
right. That's true too.
My girlfriend's family, like they like the Democrat Party, they like the leaders. Whereas everyone who even voted for Tony Blair was like, yeah, he's a bit of a
British. British just hate everyone.
That's a great observation though. It's like the celebrity, like people like turning politicians into celebrities. Like they're supposed to be public servants,
civil servants.
Like, just
like AOC
do the thing that
like
you have been
Hollywood actor. You know what I mean?
Right. Your mandate is to enact the will of the people who put you in that position, and the whole thing is not that anymore. But I guess Britain is still in that place. It just doesn't produce celebrities in the same way that America does either. Like the way in which people
Bojo had
apart from
that.
Bojo, you're right.
Boris Johnson had that.
Have you watched The Thick of It, Tron? Have you ever seen The Thick of It?
No, I've heard it. I mean, the guy that did that did Veep, right? He created Veep.
Yeah,
for HBO.
It's a masterpiece.
Is it incredible?
Just incredible.
Masterpiece.
It's incredible.
He also did that Riz Ahmed movie. What was it?
Four Lions.
Four Lions. He did that, right?
Oh my god, that's incredible! Yeah.
Tron, have you ever watched Four Lions?
I got to watch. Which one should I watch that we can discuss? I got to watch Into the Thick of It or Into the
Thick of It, and that's a series.
Thick of It is good.
That's a series.
Yeah.
Four Lions is an hour and a half movie.
What's Four Lions about?
Yeah. It's a satire, like it's a satire basically, right? And it's a comedy
about
on
what?
Four guys that are kind of like radicalizing and becoming terrorists basically. But they're like in the UK, and one of them is Riz Ahmed, who you probably know. And
so it's a comedy.
It's a comedy, but it's just so
they're
so
idiots.
funny.
They're a bunch of prats.
They're idiots. They're basically idiots. Yeah. They're just hilariously
great
stupid.
Premise.
Yeah.
Well, so Jack, that was a great answer, man. Thank you for that. Bilal, what about you? And do you discuss politics like separately with people, or do you try to avoid it?
What's interesting, when you said that, my initial reaction was, no, I hate talking about politics. But then when I zoomed out for a second, I was trying to be honest with myself and say two things. One is, yes, I used to talk about politics a lot in my personal life, let's say 10 years ago, 10, 15 years ago. If for the last like 5 or 8, I've just been like, oh, it just pisses me off. And it just became this tribal thing. And you kind of can't get to a real logical discussion. Everyone just takes their side. And I'm, as someone who's generally kind of tries to be independent in terms of how I think about things, each issue, I just find there's not that many people to talk about in that same way. So I have a couple friends who are similarly inclined, who I do talk to about politics, but most of the time when it comes up, you kind of already know someone's position. They're not really they're just trying to show they're right most of the time. So it's kind of a waste of time. Now, the second point I was going to make is, I would argue we do kind of still talk about politics without us necessarily thinking we are. So like even what we've discussed today has got a layer of politics without us necessarily. Like the question is like, what is politics? And someone might argue, well, everything is politics, talking about technology's place in society, and is AI taking on things that has a political lens too, if you go
Bored
deep
apes.
enough. Bored apes. There we go. Exactly.
Well, there's a famous quote: "You don't care about politics, but politics cares about you." So like it'll find you, right?
Exactly.
It'll find you.
So yeah, so I would say I don't necessarily,
that,
but
Bilal.
and so I don't.
This
I'm
is
not
a
sitting there
politics
talking
podcast
about.
now.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I say is like the All In Pod. As much as I like do enjoy it, still listen to it once in a while. They have so much politics in it that I don't want to listen to politics every week, and I have to like skip ahead. But anyway, yeah, go ahead.
What about? I mean, I wonder if it's the distinction between like talking about politics or talking about politicians. Like maybe there's something in that distinction where it's like the characters on stage are the points of discussion more than the underlying things that are going on.
Yeah, the characters.
I agree with that. I definitely agree with the sentiment that like semantics, isn't it? It's like total semantics. It's like talking about like which party is better than the other is like how people think about what politics is. But you're right, Bilal. It's like that doesn't even begin to describe any of this stuff.
Well, actually, another thing, I'm sure all three of us might say, I'll speak for myself and you guys can agree or disagree. Probably what has taken me out of that discussing these, typical topics around what do you care about social housing? What do you care about reproductive rights? Like all those things, which are obviously important topics, but again, I don't know enough about them to really have an opinion really worth sharing. Is like all of us probably care about individual responsibility, right? And like we care about like, okay, you have the power to make a change in your own life and your family's life and that sort of stuff. And so I've become more like that as I've become kind of disenchanted with mainstream politics, and essentially that acceptance where you have that feeling at some point where you're like, they're not going to do much for me, I need to do it myself, like in some form.
I love that. And I'll tell you
and
why I
that
love
is
that.
politics, though, right? Like that is,
No, it is
a form of politics. And I'm not like a libertarian, really. I wouldn't like class myself as that, but that's probably a libertarian idea. Like a lot of libertarians would think that. So there's complexity in that, but I do think, without me realizing, like a lot of what we cover on the pod for that reason, you could argue is political, right? In a way, like we are trying to empower people to figure out their own shit.
Difference between libertarianism and what you're describing is this: libertarians actually don't want government intervention, right? They want they want free markets. They want people to make their own decisions for everything.
State, small
state. But like the difference with what you're describing, I think, is actually quite a large difference. The difference is this: it's not that you don't want the government involved. It's like you have a finite pie of attention every day.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't be worried about what the political fight du jour is. And it's because you have your own life to worry about. And I'm not going to speak for Jack, but I assume it's a similar boat in the sense of like me after I had my kid is like, it's a very Jordan Peterson view of the world. It's like clean your, like Bilal knows, like do your bed, right? Make your bed. It's like do the small things that you can do
control
within your
what
home.
You can control.
Control what you control. And you know what? That's actually how across millions of people, society actually gets better. Because I was like, it's very similar to how you described it. In my 20s, especially university, I was very outspoken about everything.
Yeah.
I was against the Iraq war. I was like, oh, here's XYZ, why it's wrong. And it, which turned out it was wrong. But the whole point is like, I wasn't going to do anything about it. As just vocal student protester, I have way more impact in people's lives that I care about today as a parent. And by the logic of if you keep your house in order, you're a good neighbor and you're good within your community, you're not causing problems. It's like, multiply that across everybody. That's a good society. When I start caring about people's business, causing friction when I have no idea what I'm talking about, but just because it's the tribal topic du jour, that's not a positive. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I would generally agree with that. And I still would say 80-90% of how I live is kind of the same. And then I think once in a while I realize like, okay, I'm in this kind of tiny bubble. I'm not going to change something across the world or even at a political level, but that doesn't mean someone else can't strive to do that. Like, for example,
sure,
protesting is an interesting example, right? I've been to lots of protests, especially when I was younger. I don't really go nowadays, but like when I was in my university days, 20s, that was, that is like common, right? Like you're going to be going and you feel part of something. Now you could also say, well, what's the point? Like, am I going to really do anything? I'm one person of 500,000. It's the same thing kind of argument about like voting. It's like, if I don't vote, it's not going to make that much of a difference. But then if everyone says that, it doesn't actually make a difference. So I would say, like, again, without going political, we've seen lots of protests with Black Lives Matter, what's happened in the last month. Before that, Me Too movement. I will say that did raise massive awareness and things have changed. Like even with the Me Too movement, Black Lives Matter, you can argue if they're, changed much. But like the fact that we even know what those things are and there were talking points that came out of it and made us all think like, oh yeah, it's kind of weird that we just accepted that as we should be able to do that as a society. So I do think there is this citizen's responsibility if you choose to,
No, I agree with you. There's a spectrum. I think the spectrum I'm talking about are the annoying people, are the super annoying people on X that have opinion about everything. And they're trying to cancel everyone. It's just like, shut up.
You don't need to have an opinion on everything.
Deal with your own life. Just get your life in order, and then that. I think we could probably cap that. Do you guys want to talk about SBF or you guys want to?
Yeah. Jack, just last it. Jack, did you have anything else before? Because I know me and Trung were going there. So all good.
No, boys.
Perfect. Jack knows. All right. Are you guys all right for time to cover this last topic?
You guys want to do a quick 5? Yeah, if we don't do 5 minutes on SBF now, we probably won't do it for a long time. So
let's just do it. So I didn't get to read Balaji's breakdown of SBF, but from what I saw, it was him breaking down the timeline of how the crypto community was apparently the ones who uncovered.
It was taking the lead. Well, let's do the TLDR, and let me ask you guys on this. So last Friday, SBF was found guilty on 7 fraud charges related to obviously FTX lenders, depositors, and investors. Sentencing is in March. 110 years is on the table, but that's if you don't take any of the guidelines into consideration, is like how old he is, repeat offender, can he actually make a positive contribution? Totally uneducated guess, but from reading the internet, it sounds like he'll get 20-30 min, be let out in his 50s. Maybe he can make a difference. whatever. That's
Wow.
not something that we'll talk about here. But like, let's say he does get out, cool, whatever. The other element that we could talk about is, which is kind of funny. You guys remember we talked about it briefly, is like how his bet on Anthropic, like so he stole money from depositors, was his own piggy bank, and one of those piggy banks was to make VC investments. It looks like he might have invested a $500 million check into OpenAI, one of OpenAI's key competitors, Anthropic, which has raised verbal commitments, more than verbal, from Amazon and Google, over $5 billion. Like, this company might make the depositors whole. So that's how insane that part of it is. So I don't know how much I'll play into the sentencing decision, because the judge has to make the decision based on the actual charges. But if depositors get,
that's a crazy story, though.
It's crazy, dude.
He used their money, and now
to make fucking
That's
YOLO
crazy.
bets.
Did
Right?
you say 500 million? That's how much you put down?
I think I'm almost certain it's in the
Yeah, that's
nine
right.
figures.
That's right.
That's
It's
insane.
No, it's 500. It was.
Call
And
that
look,
friends and
like,
family round, man.
It was
Jesus
like, I think
Christ,
it was
that is
between
crazy.
seed and Series A, but like absolutely bananas. And as we've talked about on the
Nuts.
show, crypto's back up. So like a year ago, it looked like 10 cents on the dollar. Now it's like at 90 cents on the dollar. Either way, he'll be go to jail for decades, almost certainly. Okay, so that's out of the way. Here's the other question, which is an interesting question, which Bilal started with. This is the Balaji article. So after the sentencing was done, two people got dunk tweeted a lot. Number one was Elon. Elon had tweeted out, SBF is a major Dem donor. They will not prosecute him. He will not go to jail. Balaji also said major Dem donor, political parties will not be prosecuted. Now, obviously, the mainstream media is coming out dunking on Elon and Balaji. And you guys can probably guess who I'm sympathetic to here. It's obviously the latter, because I actually think the pressure that was put on by the internet community at the time, this is, remember, a month after Elon, this is weeks after Elon had acquired Twitter X, is like the difference between how the New York Times and the mainstream media was portraying FTX and SBF. Dude, SBF spoke at a New York Times conference like 3 weeks after that CZ tweet, and this whole thing had blown up. It was like, when people were like, everybody in the crypto community is like, yeah, we checked the chain. This guy literally stole billions of dollars. It was like, anybody that could do primary research, it was quite clear that SBF was running the greatest fraud since Bernie Madoff. Whereas he was getting a massage from the New York Times, right? So that element, so I like your guys' thoughts on that. The Balaji whole thesis, and he timelines it, shows like, well, CoinDesk kind of looked at the numbers. They're the ones that revealed it. That's crypto Twitter. There's all these users for months saying, hey, SBF, we got a lot of questions. You look like a total BSer. So there's all that. So the question is, do you think those dunks looking back are actually dunks? Or it's like, actually, I think you guys are missing the point here. Without that uproar of pressure and this whole community, like millions of people online being like, yo, this guy ganked us, there was pressure to have something done. Thoughts?
Jack, any thoughts, mate?
I mean, I think it was just like the amount of noise it made, just because of how much damage it did. Find it hard to believe that even without them, it wouldn't have. I mean, I don't know actually. How many other people with those size platforms were that vocal? I don't know. I don't know how the media cycle played out around Madoff. That would be a good comparison. I wonder if he was ever in
the comparison that he made was
media
like
darling
Madoff,
position.
totally. Madoff was arrested the day after his son called the FBI, but that's also because he admitted, right? Whereas SBF had about a month before he's actually arrested. But the whole point that Balaji was making was like, if you actually look at the history of crypto Twitter or people in the crypto community, the U.S. government has happily arrested people without maybe having the case sealed and delivered, right? Like they would find a reason to bring people in. And with SBF, whether it's political donations, whether he was a darling, there was some kid gloves with SBF, in my opinion. But yeah, that was the thrust of the Balaji article. So Bilal, I don't know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you definitely make a valid point. I think it's hard to know. Like, I mean, I haven't even read the full Balaji thing. The only thing I will say is I agree. Like that could definitely have an impact on now. There's a consensus that we're not going to do enough to him, so we need to make sure we go hard on him, whatever. So I'm sure that it did contribute. At the same time, I mean, this guy was running a crazy fraud and no one saw it for a long time. And so like there were plenty, like we can say like the crypto community figured it out after something, leaked or whatever. Maybe after the CZ tweet.
The Alameda balance sheet was kind of the big one.
Okay. Yeah. And so, and respect if, people, dug into that and figured it all out. And I'm sure they did. But like they weren't doing that way before, right? And the VCs who were out there calling him, the second coming of, Jesus, basically, didn't seem to be doing much due diligence on him. And look, I'll be honest, like we were on this pod laughing at his shoelace.
Brett Harrison, former president
and we
of
had Brett
FTX.
Harrison on here, and from what we can see, fingers crossed, he doesn't seem to be involved.
Yeah,
and
he's
he
not
looks
involved.
like,
He was not charged. Was not
yeah,
involved.
I saw he posted. I think I shared it in our group chat.
Oh, yeah, that
on
was-
the day he had
Cheers.
when SBF. Yeah, he had a beer saying cheers, because I'm sure someone like him, if he obviously assuming he was innocent, that's gonna mess up his life in his own way as well, right? And he's gonna have to deal with that himself.
By all indications, was uninvolved in this.
Yeah, from what we could
FTX,
see. Yeah. And so fingers crossed that's the case. He seemed like a nice guy, so I hope that's the case. But yeah, so I would just say it seems like I don't want to call any VCs out in particular, but I saw one of the Sequoia people posted, and lots of people were tweeting back at him saying you guys didn't do due diligence on this and put X amount of money into these guys, and so yeah, the truth is no one we found out eventually, and I'm not gonna say I figured it out and someone else didn't, because I didn't either. But we're on
Fair
the
enough.
outside, so it's kind of difficult. It sounds I remember speaking to some people who had interviewed him for their pods and for newsletters and stuff, and apparently he was very open. He even shared he's like, oh, you can log into our investor area and you can read all our numbers and all this stuff. And that, if you were someone who's reading the news saying oh, this guy is this genius, and then he's giving you access to all this stuff, I can understand how you would also be duped into not understanding what's going on. So anyway, yeah, I don't have much more to add apart from that, but people should go check out the biology breakdown. We can share it in the show notes.
Yep, 100%, man.
Perfect. All right, but I think we're running a couple minutes old, but really good chat today. Enjoyed that a lot. Anything else before we wrap up, boys?
No, that was meaty, boys. Meaty.
Yeah, nice one. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Let us know what you think. Big AI episode for you today. Edge of the internet stuff. And we'll see you guys next week.
Also, I will throw one thing. I've been really
Go on.
appreciating reading the comments on YouTube. I know a lot of people hopping over from listening on the podcast
yeah.
and just throwing comments. Guys, we
always
check
nice.
and we laugh a lot because
We respond to them as well.
Y'all
Yeah.
are on point with those comments.
Yeah, hilarious. Yeah, we appreciate those.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, and so let us know what you think of this, and we will see you guys on the next one.
Beautiful.
Cheers. Bye-bye.